A very warm welcome to everyone to this final of our 3 planned roundtables on media literacy networks. Today, we will be talking about evaluation of media and information literacy networks and activities. Just in case there are anyone is joining who I have not yet met, to introduce myself very quickly, my name is Maria Donde, and I am one of the board members of EPRA, the network which is hosting these roundtables. And I just want to say a couple of words of introduction, and then I will hand over to our moderator for this morning. Just a reminder again for those of you who perhaps with us for the previous sessions that we've been running. The purpose and the structure of these roundtables has been to build on the EPRA Media Literacy Task Force to help to provide a more regular route to share best practice, expertise between members, and of course increasingly non-members, but partners of EPRA. Specifically here, we've been focusing on the structures and the functions of multi-stakeholder media literacy networks. And we've already learned a huge amount in the last 2 sessions that we've run. Those of you who have been with us for those previous sessions will know that a key theme throughout our discussions has been the question of how we evaluate our work and how we understand the impact that we're making with these types of projects. This has many different aspects. For example, gaining a clear understanding of what media literacy activity is actually going on in a country. We talk about mapping sometimes in that context. It also means understanding the impact that projects have, which we support, facilitate, coordinate, and so on. But it's also about understanding the impact of our own networks, what they can achieve, how we can measure that achievement, and ultimately increase the impact of what we're doing. So for that reason, we've decided to devote today's session to this topic of evaluation in its broadest sense. And we'll explore it, as in previous sessions, through speaking to and discussion with some experts who we've identified who've been doing important work in these areas, including one of my colleagues from Ofcom, who I hope is about to join us. And we'll have a slightly different format today, in that we'll have some slightly more individual presentations from our 3 experts who will tell us about their work and experiences, and we'll hold on asking any questions until they've all finished speaking. We've had really fantastic interaction in all of the last sessions that we've run, so please do continue to participate in a similar way. Please feel free to post questions or comments in the chat as the speakers are speaking, and we'll come back to those after they've given their presentations. I also really want to invite in this last planned session for now as much participation as possible. And so if you want to share any of your own relevant experiences or want to ask a question directly, then I'm very, very happy to give you the opportunity to do that. Just say so in the chat, and we will hand over to you, and you can then turn on your mic and your camera and participate in person. But as I say, just do continue to post in the chat as in previous sessions. As usual, today's discussion will be moderated in the first instance, in the first half, by our longtime friend and collaborator and mentor and media literacy expert, Martina Chapman, who needs no further introduction, I hope, to most of you. Just a reminder that the meeting will be recorded and then used on the EPRA website. Please make sure you mute and turn off your camera unless you are speaking and participating, and then do stick around. We've scheduled a longer today, because at the end I think we want to wrap up both this session and all of these roundtables, and give some flavour and some indication of what we want to try to achieve further and the next steps for this task force. So without any further ado, I will now hand over to Martina to introduce our speakers and to kick off our session. Thank you, Martina.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thanks everybody for joining us for this 3rd session. As Maria mentioned, the format is slightly different, so we're still looking for all of your interaction on the chat, but also when we get to the panel discussion, we're really eager to hear your voices and see your faces as well. I'm going to start off the morning. Our first speaker this morning is Stephanie Comey. Stephanie is somebody that we know very well. She's very high profile in Ireland in the media literacy field. She's a senior manager with the BAI, the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland, and she is responsible for a number of media development and regulatory areas, including, of course, media literacy. She's a member of the EPRA Working Group on Media Literacy. She's a member of the European Commission Expert Group on Media Literacy, and she's a member of the Steering Committee on the World Summit of Media and Children. Stephanie is also Vice Chair of Media Literacy Ireland, which most of you, I hope, will have heard about at this stage. But what you won't have heard about is the work and the approach that Media Literacy Ireland has done in relation to that thorny question of trying to figure out how effective is what we do. So Stephanie has kindly offered to take us through some of the steps around that this morning. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Stephanie.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. I have no idea what Martina said, but I don't think half of it was true, so please don't listen to it at all. So I suppose I am going to do the thing about sharing something now. So you're going to have to bear with me because, you know, we noticed this morning that all these people talking about media literacy sometimes have to hone their own skills. Yes. So I suppose I just want to talk about our own experience with Media Literacy Ireland and the BAI in terms of evaluation of media literacy initiatives, but I suppose also primarily recognise that there are huge challenges to evaluating media literacy initiatives, and that's not a reason not to do it. So hopefully, I'm going too fast here. For three things, I suppose, to know when you're evaluating media literacy initiatives in general, and things that we have focused on with Media Literacy Ireland, is that media literacy is really, evaluation, of media literacy is really essential. You have to do it. You have to get a sense of how good or how poor the impact of the stuff that you're doing is. So that's definitely something that we've tried to take on board at a very early stage. But the other thing to know about evaluation of media literacy is that it's incomplete. It's impossible really to map out in all clarity and completeness the impact that we're having. And that's because media literacy is really such a multifactorial thing. It's hard to assess whether it's the media literacy that is generating the results, or greater awareness, or whatever else it might be. So it's difficult to assess that. And therefore, it means that evaluation of media literacy initiative is imperfect. But because these are the challenges that we face, sometimes it might feel like we can't really go on, but there are also huge opportunities. So the impacts of media literacy, as I've said before, they can be long-ranging. So something that you do today, or that we do today, may have an impact in 3 years' time. How we track that is really, really difficult. And again, it's multifactorial, so it's difficult to calibrate exactly what we're measuring. And it can be costly. In Ireland, there is a little funding for media literacy initiative, but there isn't very much at all, if any, that is directed towards evaluation. And again, timelines is also an issue with media literacy evaluation. So for example, the Media Smart campaign that we ran in 2019 to coincide with Media Literacy Week, European Media Literacy Week, that was delivered in 9 weeks. It was a huge amount of work. There was so much scrambling, putting everything together. Thinking about an evaluation framework was so not on the list of priorities. Another question that arises as well is methodology. What's the best methodology? Is there one? So I suppose our own experience says that evaluating media literacy initiatives, it does require tolerance for ambiguity. So people that like just black and white or yes or no answer are not necessarily very well served in evaluating media literacy initiatives. But let's talk about the opportunities that you can, that's certainly we've experienced in terms of Media Literacy Ireland, it's looking at what indicators of success, and I'll come back to the success later on. What those indicators might be. So for us, we've looked at things in a very kind of localized, pragmatic way. We've talked about, our growth in membership, the number of peoples that we see knocking on the door of Media Literacy Ireland and wanting to join in, who they are, what they like, what they can add to the network. And that has been quite exponential for us, because when we started the Media Literacy Ireland journey, there were 17 members, and we're standing at over 120 now. So it's quite significant. And some of the members represent themselves, but some of the members represent key organizations, whether education, academia, so universities, for example. We have civil society organizations, we have broadcasters. Most of the broadcasters in Ireland are affiliated to Media Literacy Ireland in some shape or form. We have online platforms as well that have played varying active roles, some more than others, but that are there and that are contributing to the work. So that growth in membership, we felt, is definitely an evaluation indicator in itself, about the value. Evaluation has the word value in it, and I'll come back to that. A link to the growth in membership, we've also noticed over the last year, and certainly since the Be Media Smart campaign launched its first round in March 2019, which feels like a lifetime away now, is the numbers of active volunteers. So Media Literacy is a volunteer network. Martina is the national coordinator for Media Literacy Ireland. But all the members of Media Literacy Ireland that do a lot of work on the ground through working groups or the steering groups, they're all volunteers. And what we have seen is a growth of the number of active volunteers. So it's not just that they're getting the Media Literacy Ireland registration, they're actually engaging with the work. Sorry, getting distracted here. And delivering activities on the ground itself. We're also finding a growth in number of members interested in the steering group work, so the more strategic strategic work, if you like. So there's a steering group of 13, 14 people at the moment with Media Literacy Ireland. We have a rotation process in place to keep the membership and the strategic thinking quite fresh. And we had 4 people stepping down this year. We have 10 volunteers to take their place. So in a way, it's a bit of an embarrassment of riches, and that's a really good problem to have. But it also tells us, as an evaluation indicator, that there is value there for the various members and for the audiences that they serve. We have also seen a diversification of the type of initiatives that we deliver, so a broader range of activities, and that means that we cater for a wider audience. So last Friday, we were delivering a Horizon event on the communication of science, for example, where we had very eminent professors of epidemiology. I suppose it is fashionable at the moment, coming to talk to us about communicating science and issues of mis and disinformation around the communication of science and what journalists can do about it. And we had journalists sharing their experiences as well. So that's very, very helpful and is something that we would not have tapped into a year ago. So that's also an evaluation criteria, if you like, in terms of the diversification of the range of activity. Now, we've also quantitative measurements. So, for example, we measured the impact of the Be Media Smart campaign. As I said earlier, we had to deliver that in a very short time frame. So a lot of the evaluation of the Be Media Smart campaign last year was actually retrospective. But what we looked at and what we asked our stakeholders to do is to gather data in their own areas. So, number of so audience share in terms of our broadcasters, also the frequency of broadcasting of the ad, for example. So we had a whole range of little quantitative measures that gave us a sense of how often Irish people had heard the ad or seen the ad, and that gives us a sense of what we can measure. And that brings me on to the next thing about evaluation and how we can make it work. We have really tried to use the strength of Media Literacy Ireland as a network. So it's a network, it gathers people from very, very different backgrounds. So we want to use those different backgrounds to help tell us whether the work that Media Literacy Ireland is conducting is having an impact. And one of the things that has been done this year is looking at a quantitative survey through an omnibus survey. So that's a random questionnaire of a representative sample of the population here in Ireland, and get called by an independent company to be asked a number of probing questions about their understanding of the ad, their understanding of Media Literacy Ireland, and whether they've seen messages around misinformation and disinformation. One of our members is Ipsos, who obviously is a global company. So this is the Irish arm of Ipsos, and their contribution to the network was to deliver that survey for us free of charge, because they could tag it on to another piece of research that they were doing. So that really is a process of evaluation as collaboration between the various parties. And I think that that's really important to kind of bear in mind. If you were building networks, the strength of that network helps you evaluate the work. So it's not a standalone piece of work. I think in terms of what our experience has been, and what we would continue to do, and maybe talk to our colleagues elsewhere in Europe to work with, would be that really evaluation of media literacy initiatives require mixed methods. So you can get the numbers, the quantitative surveys like I've just described, and that will give you a snapshot on the impact on citizens, and that that is important. In the first round of, we reran the Be Media Smart campaign this year in an effort to, I suppose, tackle the amount of disinformation that was happening in Ireland, and misinformation as well. We had Ipsos measure that, I think was it April? Martina will come in, I think it was April and May, and the unprompted recall, meaning people who knew what Be Media Smart was about without being asked it's the ad about stop, think, check, etc., was actually 27%, if I'm correct, 28%, which I'm told is really, really high. I know nothing about those things, and that's why I rely on the likes of Ipsos to give me a hand here. But that means that without any effort really on our part, we were still able to manage to capture the fact that we had made an impact on people's memory and people's engagement with the message of the Be Media Smart campaign. So that's really important. The increase, so that's the quantitative survey aspect, but it's really important to measure as well the more qualitative stuff. So that's your increased engagement from members. It's harder to measure in terms of numbers. You can say, oh, well, we had 5 and now we have 20, but it's also what they deliver is harder to measure, but it's a very, very valuable qualitative evaluation. And I think it's important to bear that in mind as well. And I suppose I'd finish by saying that what we're trying to measure with Media Literacy Initiative is less success of the Media Literacy Initiative than its value. And I think that that's a really important mental shift for people. So it's not about saying, oh, people are X% more media literate now, even though that would be a very desirable number. It's also about being able to say, we know there is value in the initiative because they are rippling effects that we are noticing, and that's an important indicator of success as well, or value. So I think I'm going to finish now, and I'm happy to take questions. And I'll stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. That was an excellent that was an excellent summary of the very pragmatic but very innovative approach that I think Media Literacy Ireland has taken to evaluation around media literacy, and in particular that shift from to focus on the value. It's always useful, I think, to get that insight from the front line about the trials and tribulations of trying to evaluate and measure while you're literally on the run with the project as well. As somebody once said to me, if we don't get on and do the project, there'll be nothing to evaluate in the first place. So it is a balancing act. I see there is a question there from Sally, but Sally, if you don't mind, we're going to hold off on the questions, and after we've had the presentations, we can take the interventions then. And Maria is going to do a panel discussion at that stage, so we'll hold the questions then. Thanks, Sally. And thank you, Stephanie. So we're going to move on now across the water geographically, and we're going to talk to Dr. Alberto Fernandez. Alberto is the Principal Policy Advisor with Ofcom in the UK, where his policy work helps UK citizens make the most of the rapid evolution of the communication sector. And this ranges on issues from mobile internet to television. Previously, he was a management consultant, a BBC journalist, and a foreign correspondent for Brazilian newspapers. He has a PhD in telecommunications with an element of economics. And this morning, he's also leading on Ofcom's work on the use of evidence and evaluation in media literacy at Ofcom. And we all know Ofcom have the gold standard when it comes to the longitudinal, qualitative and quantitative research. So we're welcome, Alberto. We're looking forward to hearing from you on this.
Oh, hi. Great. Yeah. So I just really thanks Stephanie for sort of mentioning the collaborative aspect of evaluation, because it's really a big theme for us as well. So just a quick sort of reminder. So we're working on evaluation on the basis of our existing duties, which are to promote media literacy in the UK. And we focus here on enabling others, mostly, media literacy practitioners, to evaluate and improve the initiatives via evaluation. But it also helps us prepare for the future, which might include future duties. Just on this bit of collaboration and really improving interventions via evaluation. Evaluation is sometimes seen as something a bit punitive, like have you passed or failed, and that's not where our focus is. We really want to use it for improvement. So we use this model that's known in the UK as the what works model, as in what works in policy. We need to find out what works, and we want to find out what works in media literacy and make sure that those lessons are used. So we see it as a cycle here. So I have this inner circle, this outer circle, which is for every individual initiative. And we want to encourage them to deliver the intervention and then ask questions. Did it work and why did it work? And then go back and improve the intervention. And that's the cycle. But there's also sort of a wider part of evidence in the middle here, which is about sharing lessons across different initiatives and sharing lessons across different fields. So we can, media literacy could take lessons from the education field, for example, and we want initiatives to be able to put lessons into the central part and also take lessons from this central part and use it for our interventions. So our rough roadmap, very, very briefly, is that we started trying to make evaluation easier to use for people, to create an accessible evaluation toolkit. And we also looking at summaries of what works, summaries of evidence. So looking at past evaluations that have been done in other countries, in other contexts. And all of this should feed into more efficient interventions and in better media literacy. In terms of our plans and deliverables for the next 12 years, we have a group of very good advisors on the field who we've been working on creating sort of evaluation strategy for the next 12 months. And our focus there is just recognizing how hard it is and making sure that we starting by laying foundations that we can build upon later. And we found the best way to do that is by promoting a very structured approach to evaluation, which we call building blocks, or is known as theory of change for the many experts among you. And this is going to feed into a first version of a prototype toolkit that we want to develop in collaboration with end users. So this toolkit will have two parts. We have one, some guidance on how to structure evaluations, and second, a library of evidence, methods, and metrics. And all this will be organized around those building blocks ideas. So, and I'll give some practical examples in a minute. But they're just that you sort of you break down in parts your intervention, and then for each individual part, you can think about what is the evidence, what are the methods, what are the metrics, and we want to sort of iterate and collaborate in developing all of this. So an example here of this sort of building blocks approach, very simplified example, of course, illustrative. So say that your intervention is that, I'm gonna, I'm a fact checker, I'm gonna talk to a platform, and I'm gonna get them to display some tips on how to avoid misinformation online. So the first question we ask is why do you think that's going to work? How is it going to work? And the answer might be something like the following. So imagine that you display the tips, people will read them, then people will remember them, and people will act on the tips. And if people act on the tips, they will be more resistant to misinformation. So you have sort of four building blocks that sort of feed into each other, and each one can be tested separately. So it really helps organize your evaluation. And not only the evaluation, but it also helps you reuse knowledge from other interventions and from other fields. Just going back to that initial picture of the sort of the what works scheme with the big pot of evidence that comes from everywhere. So, for example, there's one building block here that says people will remember the tips. And what makes a message memorable? So you don't need to reinvent the wheel, because you've gone to the work of identifying those building blocks. Then you can access this evidence, maybe from the library that we're going to build, or from other sources about everything that's out there about what do we know about which messages are forgettable, which messages are memorable. So you get a straight benefit even beyond evaluation. And actually, you might find that you're not going to focus your evaluation on this part, because there's so much evidence out there that your money is better spent focusing on other parts of your chain. Another very important point, I think, as Stephanie mentioned, it's hard to evaluate, and budgets and times are limited. But one thing that this approach really helps with is to make the most of a limited budget, limited time, limited resources, because you don't necessarily need to evaluate all of the chain in order to get benefit. It's great if you can, but just to give an example, sort of the industry sometimes just evaluate and improve one segment. So Google famously tested 41 shades of blue in their links to find out which one was most attractive, that people would click the most. And they got a lot of value of it, sort of measured in pounds. So they didn't need to evaluate the whole value chain that generates revenue for Google to get a benefit. They were able to get a benefit from a very small intervention. So in these examples, you could gain a lot just by evaluating one step. So, are the way you're displaying the tips really readable, or you could focus here. Once you teach someone those tips, will people really act on them, or will they just remember and do something else? So it gives you a lot of flexibility here. Again, it helps you find appropriate methods, and I think something that Stephanie also mentioned is for in some cases you want to use a quantitative method, and sometimes you use a very sophisticated method like a randomized control trial. But it depends on the situation, and by breaking down in parts, it's much easier to stop and think what's the right method for different steps here. And outcomes, are famously hard to measure, especially in media literacy. But other things, is a message memorable? You can imagine a way to test it that is simpler. You can, get a room with some people, give them a few messages, and see, give them a few messages in the morning, see how many they remember in the afternoon and which one. So you can think of different methods by breaking down. Also promotes transparency and flexibility. So it really helps if you're trying to understand what an intervention achieved or what an assessment achieved. It really helps if you're able to relate what you're testing back to your theory of change, to your building blocks. So for example, in this example here, you could do an evaluation report and say, well, we only tested this element here, the people will act on the tips, and we relied on other evidence for other steps, and this final step is just too hard, it's beyond our means. So that gives me, you can learn a lot from that, and it just gives me that transparency, rather than finding a report with sort of metrics where you need to do a lot of thinking to understand exactly how it relates to the change you're trying to make. It really helps you organize and provide transparency. So to create this flow diagram, you have to be really clear about what you're trying to achieve. It really helps you relate metrics to particular steps in your intervention, and it helps identify the gaps in your assessment. And again, we need to be realistic that most media literacy assessments will have gaps, will be imperfect, but it's just learning to make the most of those imperfect assessments and get real benefit from them. And also, I think another aspect that's very relevant for media literacy is makes you be transparent about what parts of your model are outside your sphere of influence, because most of us are trying to achieve very, very ambitious things, like improve the understanding of the whole population, and there are many factors out there in the environment influencing that. And by being able by breaking down in parts and just separating which areas your organization is accountable for and what are the factors that are outside your sphere of influence, that really helps to be clear and transparent about those things. I just got an example here, which I quite like. It's from an organization that advocates for immigrants. So they put here the area of accountability in the sort of building blocks. So they're trying to change the narrative about immigrants and therefore change the public's perception. And they think that will feed into policy change, but that's not an area they are accountable for. So in media literacy, you can see loads of cases where actually we are one part of a much bigger environment, but that doesn't mean that you cannot recognize other things in your assessment. So the next steps for us. So we are working now on a first version of this prototype toolkit, which will be more focused on the guidance about how to create those building blocks. The second part of the prototype toolkit will be this library about different methods, different metrics, different evidence, and that will take longer to create. So by November, we want to start testing this first part, and we're looking for beta testers. Please do volunteer. Something else we're commissioning an evidence review about what works in disinformation online. So again, just coming back to that model, let's see what we can learn from all the recent studies that have been done in this area, and from other fields as well. So what can we learn in terms of how do you communicate a message, how do you campaign for something to change behavior? So we'll review the evidence and see what lessons are there that have been studied already that can be used by practitioners, and that will feed into our prototype toolkit, to feed into our libraries of evidence, especially of evidence, possibly also into sort of metrics and methodologies. And the idea is that we want a constant improvement for this prototype. Again, going back to Stephanie's point about collaboration, we want to really engage with our practitioners and just make this better and better over time, because it's hugely challenged. Everybody knows that, but we need to improve one step at a time is what we're aiming for. And that's, I think that's the key message. I'm going to stop here. So collaboration, and we'll be welcoming additional beta testers if they are volunteers.
Alberto, thank you. That was an excellent presentation on what I think is an incredibly exciting project, and I, for one, will be eagerly awaiting its publication. I'm sure I won't be the only one, and I think this has the potential to be so useful to media literacy practitioners and researchers and policymakers across the board. I'm really taken with this idea of having the template, but also the library of evidence and methods and metrics. So I would not be surprised if you're inundated with volunteers. And just a question on that: how do people volunteer? Do they email you, or?
Yeah, just email me. That's probably the easiest.
Okay. Do you want to put your email address, if you're comfortable to do so? You could put your email address in the chat, and then people can maybe follow up directly with you. So thank you very much, Alberto. On that note, then we're going to move over a little bit further east again, and we're going to talk to Aleksandra Temenugova from Macedonia. Aleksandra is a former TV journalist who in 2005 moved into journalism training, and from 2008 was head of the journalism study program and PR in Skopje. She was involved in numerous media literacy activities developed by the Institute of Communication Studies, including acting as editor-in-chief of the high school newspaper Medium. And she was also administrator of the media literacy website medium.edu.mk, as well as coordinator of the National Media Day with over 100 students participating in it. She was the project coordinator for the 3-year EU-funded project Media Literacy Coalition, and that was recognised as one of the 10 best media literacy projects in Europe, and was presented last year during the Media Literacy Week in Brussels. So I think Aleksandra is in an excellent position to talk to us about evaluating actual media literacy projects on the ground. Over to you, Aleksandra.
Thank you. Thank you, Martina, and thank you for all EPRA people for organizing such events on very interesting topics. I'm so happy, I have to say, to be part of this of today's roundtable. First, for the opportunity to say a word or two on what we do in media literacy in Macedonia, and second, to grab some valuable experience on evaluation and monitoring on media literacy activities in Europe. Despite of the previous speakers who gave us some more theoretical approach on evaluation of media literacy activities, I will go further back from the practice level. So, and we'll say something more what we do and how we evaluate our media literacy activities. First, as you said, I work at the Institute of Communication Studies, which is an academic non-for-profit institution and organization in the field of journalism and media studies and corporate communication. The institute was established 8 years ago by the School of Journalism and Media, and 2 years ago, both institutions consolidated their resources, including the media literacy program, which is among the one of the core activities of the institute. So, what we actually do in this area, we have our main focus is working with high school community, but we have a valuable experience working with media outlets and civil sector. So first, I would like to put several points on our work with high school students and teachers. So we do different projects, mainly focused on non-formal literacy workshops, focused on deconstruction of media messages, news production, and debunking disinformation. So another issue which is quite important, we give students open space for where they can apply the game skills in the high school newspaper medium, which was and still is the only newspaper in the country that was published on monthly basis. It comes as an insert, 8 pages insert in the only on the oldest daily in Macedonia, Nova Macedonia. So here the students have chances to write articles, interviews, post their photo stories, and etc. And due to Corona, of course, Medium at the moment lives online as a high school news platform and as a media literacy resource hub. So, along with the newspaper, we deliver high school news literacy classes. We call them media labs. We work nearly with 40 to 50 schools, which is about half of the numbers of high schools in the country. It is interesting, and it is very important for us because they, after 8 years working with high schools, they recognize Medium as their own platform. They trust us and they approach us if they need something worth sharing or produced by the students. And we are very proud because we have some students who were with Medium as a regular correspondents during the whole secondary education. As Martina said in the introduction, we introduced Media Day as an annual event since 2014. Every year, we organize a visit for our high school students, nearly about 100 to 120, and the number goes up and increase every year. Where high school students in the mainstream visit the mainstream media outlets, including the public broadcaster. The last Media Day, this is very interesting. We ended up in the presidential residence, where nearly about 60-70 students interviewed the president of the state. And so far, through this Media Day, we've provided opportunities. I'm talking about since 2014. We've provided for more than 500 high schoolers to learn in person about the role of media and their function in the society. Every year we organize high school contests as well, Express Yourself Through Media, when we invite students to produce videos, posters, photo stories, and our authors of the best products are awarded with opportunity to attend 4 days media literacy camps. So far, we organized 4 media literacy camps for about 100 students who experienced intensive hands-on 4 days journalism training where they produce some sort of newscast. Additional activities, which is quite recent, is that early this year we celebrated EU Media Literacy Week 2020. So that was activity that we conducted from January to March, where we, together with the EU delegation in Skopje, through this Be Media Active high school project, we merged 6 high school teams and 6 media outlets in production news content, which was published on the media. So we received the highest interest. So as Alberto was talking before, what works, this really works. Partnership between media outlets, high schools, and civil society organizations. So we received the biggest number of applications from nearly 30 schools, which is about 1/3 of the schools in the country, who providing partnerships with more than 30 media outlets in the country. So if I have enough time, Martina, I would put just a short video, and it takes about 1 minute and 40 seconds to see how that look like. Just let me. Oh, sorry.
Yes, we can see the video.
But there is no sound, yeah?
No sound, no.
Okay, I'll just put later on the link so everybody can see it later on. Just it gives an insight how this worked, and it was a really good experience because, as I said, this really worked. So these days we are very busy preparing for the upcoming Media Literacy Days under the auspices of the National Media Regulator. We join our forces together with the EU-funded project News and Digital Literacy, where X is partnered with with the Macedonian Institute for Media and Union of Journalists, and we are preparing some set of workshop with high school students on and teachers on tools and practices for detection and disinformation and misinformation. And there are 2 webinars on the go and the debate with high schoolers on their social media habits. Here I would like to stress out the strong relationship with mainstream media and civic sector, which we considered is one of the most effective options for media literacy promotion for each side. We proved that is the most bold cooperation was the previous project, which was 2 years ago, when we merged media outlets and civil society organizations in a partnership, and then we wanted to prove that with adequate and systematic approach of media usage, citizens can really fulfill their rights and initiate changes in society. We had several initiatives which resulted with changes in legislation. There was one CSOs which advocates the rights of rare disease patients, and these 8 media outlets were part of the Media Literacy Coalition within MAMIL project, and now they are all members of this big Macedonian media literacy network, which was established by the Agency for Media Services. Another important moment is our solid cooperation with the public broadcaster that mentioned Stephanie as well. The public broadcaster in Macedonia heard our appeals to join their media literacy promotion obligation and publishes all educational videos. They get involved in all our activities on a regular basis. So when we talk about now, we come to the final question: which methods we use to measure our individual projects and to measure our impact. First, when we do media literacy, we get from the basic concept of media literacy and the competences we try to achieve. We understand it in its wider definition. That was the first is to access, to analyze and evaluate, to create, to reflect and to take action, or to be an agent of change. Within the years of experience, we try to obtain all these competences at once, but spoken fairly, in different activities, we put we put accent of gaining different competences for different target audience, of course. So that depends on their needs, their knowledge. It depends on many other factors. For example, when we work with high school students, we are more focused on analysis and evaluation, critical thinking, and of course on creation, as we want them to recruit them and to express themselves to be a journalist for our high school newspaper medium. When we work with civil society organizations, for example, or with media outlets, we aim for action, as we see them as agents, as promoters of changes, as role models of active citizenship. And the main question is, are we accessible in this? So as Stephanie mentioned before, I'm so glad because here in the stage we are focusing the same challenges as the network in Ireland is doing. So here is to come the question on the methodological approach used for evaluating or measuring the impact of our media literacy initiatives. We all know that is one thing to learn and teach media literacy, and is quite another to measure or assess it. How to assess it and evaluate media literacy skills and how to measure the improvements, as we all know, is still some of the bigger stumbling blocks for media literacy. And but this is not the case only for Macedonia, but let's say in the region as well. It's very tricky to measure skills improvement in an environment. This is very important when there is no national when there is no national assessment of media literacy level among kids. So it would be fair to mention that the proactiveness on our media regulator, which last year conducted the second media literacy assessment among adults, which is at least gives a starting point where what needs to be improved. So in such a limbo zone, we usually stick to our internal research, which provides us a basic insight of the needed skills, competences, and knowledge on the media literacy. What we usually do when we work with high school students, we usually use the common quantitative methods, such as pre-test and post-test questionnaires on student reflective skills, questionnaires with both open-ended or liquor-type questions focused on media literacy. Within the current news literacy project, we designed a phone survey with open and closed-up questions about the habits of social media users, how they get informed from. We just did the second survey, and so we can compare the results that we had from 3 years ago when we started this project. So maybe the biggest impact is that through all these activities, resources, and research, we succeeded to put attention on the importance of critical perception of media messages among teenagers. Eventually, and we are quite happy about this, the Ministry of Education and Science in Macedonia just opened a debate on educational reforms, which means introducing media literacy in the school curricula, which is really a good point for impact for what we've done. And Martina gave me the role to say some few words about the mapping media literacy in Macedonia, which is usually from the perspective of how it's done from the perspective of the media literacy network. Just few points. The network in Macedonia was established 2 years ago by the national regulator with 35 founding members. Now the network has nearly doubled, and has 61 members. Regarding the mapping, last year, the network started to gather the key institutions and media literacy resources as all research, videos, educational materials, and etc., with intention to keep all this resource hub updated on a regular basis. This is done usually. We received very often circular mails, mails from the people from the agency, asking for updates on activities and resources of the current and potential members. At the moment, there is the second round for updating the data, which will be supposed to be finished, I think, next week, just in front of the start of the media literacy days initiative. And all these days, all members are in final preparation activities for celebration this event. It starts 22nd October to 2nd November. The majority of events will be online, so the agency will conduct online poll to track how the audience reacts on the event, and this is the initial step for evaluation of the network activities, and it's rather new. And let's say, and I'm happy to say, we are sort of still in the learning process on the evaluation of the evaluation. I'm finishing up. Yeah.
Okay, Aleksandra, thank you very much. You have been incredibly busy. It's very interesting to hear you reflect that the importance of civic society and also the media in delivering your projects, and also that the different audiences need different approaches, and then also different evaluation methods. And it's good to hear about the mapping as well, because mapping is something we hear quite a lot about, and I've no doubt it will come up in the panel discussion a little later. Just before we move on to the panel discussion, I wanted to open up the floor to see if there's anybody else who wants to make an intervention. I know Monica has already volunteered. So Monica, if you're there, come in, Monica.
I'm there. I'm
there you go. Terrific.
Hello, everyone. A very good morning from Barcelona. Thanks very much for this interesting roundtable, because I think as well that the evaluation of the media literacy projects is a critical point in the life of a media literacy project, no? Because nowadays it seems that media literacy projects are popping up around, I don't know, at incredibly, they are very fast, no, in popping up. But I think that already we need to establish some sort of evaluation methods in order to see if these projects are working or not. Let me just share with you very briefly what we are doing here in Barcelona, the Catalan Audiovisual Council, in terms of evaluating our activities and initiatives of media literacy. The CAC has 3 different ways to measure the impact of its media literacy initiatives, okay? I think, and I do agree with Stephanie that when she was mentioning the pragmatic way, we are taking this pragmatic way, Stephanie Comey, to the extreme, okay? Because at the moment, we are just measuring the impact, I would say, from the cold data point of view. Okay, so we are interested in the numbers that we get and also in the metrics, in the feedback of the metrics that these free tools that we can have in the net, they report to us. Okay, so I know that when it comes to that interpretation, maybe no matter if you have a 40% impact of one initiative, this impact can linger more in time than maybe an initiative that on the paper you look and it has the 70%, for instance, no, that this initiative can have a shorter life. 3 ways. The first way, the CAC has 4 different social media profiles only for media literacy in Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And every fortnight we check how many retweets, how many sharings, how many viewings, how many likes we have to the contents that we post in the social networks. I mean, with this profile, with a specific profile. And also in parallel, we check how many, the numbers of subscriptions, followers that we have. Okay. So as you know, my colleagues from 2 weeks ago, speaking of the platform, they provide me with some data. And as of yesterday, we have 110 subscribers in YouTube, 145 followers in Facebook, 297 followers in Instagram, and in Twitter, we are the top of the top, 1,312 followers. Okay, so this would be the first way. Every 15 days, we check these numbers. Second, all of our documents, all of our spots, campaigns, recommendations, etc., we are posting them in our media literacy webpage that is called educac.cac, educac.cac, sorry. And this webpage, we can split into 2 parts. One that it's public, I mean, you can access to all the documents. And the second one, that it's the one that allows you to access to the educative materials for primary and secondary schools. The first half of the webpage, we take the Google Analytic metrics. So they are the free ones, okay? And the second one, we are taking the registrations, the number of registrations at the moment. Metrics coming from the Google Analytics. We can have the number of users by time periods. We can have the only users. We can have the sessions that these only users are having through the web page. Okay. We can know the average lasting time of every click that they do, that they check the documents. So for the moment, for us, these metrics are quite good. As for the second part of the web page, as I said, we have this number of registrations that at the moment we have 2,030 people registered that have got the interest to access to this second part of the web to get the materials. But one of the weaknesses that we have still to improve is to see the real impact of the educative materials in the schools. So this means that in the near future, what we want to do is to establish a more sophisticated way of measuring the real impact of the materials. Not how many people are registered, because we don't know if they are downloading them or if one person is sharing the contents, the materials with 10 more. So in the near future, and I will keep updated, we are going to introduce a more professional system of evaluation of the impact of this material. And last but not least, what we are doing, the third way, is through the media literacy newsletter. So this newsletter is issued every fortnight, every 15 days. And what we are doing is through the MailChimp platform, we are getting these metrics, no? So these would be the 3 ways that we measure our impact nowadays. So we hope to improve, but at the moment, these are the measures that for us, they are okay. Thank you very much.
Super. Okay, thank you very much, Monica, for that intervention. It's terrific to see all the different ways that people are measuring in different aspects of media literacy. I'm very conscious of time, and I know we have questions sitting there, so I'm going to hand straight over to Maria to start the panel discussion. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you, Martina, and thank you so much to everyone who has already spoken. That was really fascinating. I myself work with Alberto at Ofcom, and it was still really, really interesting for me to hear about the work that we're doing internally, because it really is really quite scientific and hopefully of interest and of use to others as well. So while we're building it within this closed environment, I really hope that we will be able to share it with other EPRA members and members of the task force in the future as well. And of course, I very strongly encourage anyone who wants to participate in that beta testing. Please do get in touch with Alberto or with me. It would be great to have participation from all around Europe in that. I'm going to go to Sally, I think, first, because she had a question specifically for Stephanie. But before I hand over to her, I just wanted to mention that this morning I happened to see that one of our own Media Literacy Network members, Newswise, which is a news literacy project going out into schools and also running family news literacy groups and workshops across the UK, coming out of the Guardian Foundation. And they have just published their evaluation report. So they are a member of our network. They have also been working with Ofcom in terms of evaluation. And I'm just going to post a link to their evaluation report in the chat in just a moment. But Sally, if you're there and you're with us, I would love to hear from your question for Stephanie.
Thanks, Maria. Thank you. I'll be very quick. I know time is short. No, it was just specifically about that Ipsos study, Stephanie. I wondered, it's interesting that you have Ipsos doing that, of course, because they are an international organisation. Do you see yourselves then making comparisons with other countries using similar surveys? Is that possible?
Wow, that's a great question and something I hadn't thought about at all. So this is an area of exploration for me.
Would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Ipsos is a member of that network. Actually, they approached us just after we launched the first Be Media Smart campaign, so in March last year. We, BAI, have done a bit of work with Ipsos over the years, as I'm sure other regulators have done across Europe. And so we have a relationship with them, and you know, it's a small country, so you pop into each other's offices at the time that you could do that. So the Irish CEO of Ipsos came in and said, you know, I saw the campaign, I'm interested in, I think it's a great campaign, I want to know more about it, and I want to see how Ipsos can help. So it was really quite a self-motivated piece from Ipsos Ireland. And then when we decided to launch the second Be Media Smart campaign, they also came on board and they said, listen, there might be an opportunity for us to give you some space to evaluate what the impact of it is. So we said, of course, we will take it. So we're quite at the beginning of this journey, Sally. You know, like we're not necessarily, we're still very much looking at it from an Irish perspective and trying to get even all the members involved in the process of thinking about evaluation. Is already quite a bit of hard work. So it's not that I'm saying no. I think there's definitely scope there, and I think it would be very, very interesting. But I think that's a little bit further down the line.
Further down the road, yeah. Just it's a pity when you're doing so much work on it, and it is an international organisation. It would make some sense, of course, to make some comparisons. Anyway, thanks very much.
Through this platform, there may be some scope for through EPRA and the work that regulators in their own countries are doing with Ipsos. You know, I'm always a believer that we can build networks and we can refine this. But I think it's a great idea and certainly something to explore further.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the other talks as well. It's been really interesting.
Thank you, Sally, also for your participation and support. I'm going to stay with Stephanie, actually. So I don't see any immediate other burning questions in the chat, but please do post them and also if you wanted to react to anything that any of our contributors have said. So I'm going to take the opportunity to ask one of my 100 questions that I've written down. Just staying with Stephanie for a moment, I was really interested in your conceptualization of talking about value rather than success, and I thought that was a really interesting sort of conceptual way of looking at it, which I hadn't really thought about before. I just wondered, how, in your view, how would you then describe or your, you give your kind of evaluation, if you like, of the value that media literacy practitioners in Ireland get from the network?
So that's feedback based. Okay, so that goes back to this more qualitative aspect that I mentioned earlier on. So we have had, and it's anecdote based, but we've had a number of organizations that have worked with us for quite a while now, talking about why they want to talk, they work with us. So, for example, WebWise Ireland, which is a very, very well established organization in Ireland, has been around for far longer than Media Literacy Ireland has been, and is really around online safety for children. Their involvement in the network is just phenomenal because they see it as a platform to showcase their work, to get additional work done at a European level as well. And we've been able to connect them with a number of organizations and regulators, et cetera, across Europe. So there's been a lot of work done by WebWise. So they see that as, and WebWise is a big organization. Like they have people working on this full time, all the time. We're a tiny, tiny unit within the BAI supporting Media Literacy Ireland, which is an association of volunteers. So there is a disconnect there somewhere, but somehow they still feel that Media Literacy Ireland is giving them more than they would get on their own. So that's not just anecdotal, that's things that they have said to us. So again, it is around the engagement. We've seen the academic community in Ireland being very enthused by the idea of this network and coming into us and saying, I want to bring my students in. I want to bring my colleagues in. I want to bring my department in. So we have a lot of academic interest and academic contribution to the network. So we have a website for Be Media Smart. There's regular contributions made to that. We're actually not short of contributions. We have people from actually around the world coming in and saying, can I push an article on your website? So we're in a place now where Martina's work has also shifted to being editor of the content that goes on the website because there is so much of it. So that these are value, I think, measurements as opposed to success measurements. So I cannot turn around and say, civic engagement and media literacy among Irish people is X% higher than it used to be before we started this work. But I can say that we have some of the biggest universities in Ireland, biggest media departments in Ireland, biggest organizations dealing with online safety, wanting to engage and sharing that engagement, and Media Literacy Ireland being a platform and a showcase for their work. That's the value, I guess. Does that answer your question?
That does. No, that very much so, and that's exactly what I was sort of interested in getting at, because I think what's been quite interesting is I think that all four actually of the speakers who've talked about evaluation today have talked about mixed methods and the importance of using using different types of evaluation methodologies in order to build a kind of an overall picture. And I just think that qualitative one is quite a big building block within that. I'm gonna
Can I just add just something really quick to kind of I suppose illustrate what I was saying? Martina and I got an email yesterday from our colleagues in WebWise who've been developing a campaign around online safety for pretty young children, based on the theme of the safe cross code. I don't know if, I'm sure every country has some kind of safe cross code for helping children to cross the road safely. And this is about, online safety and how the safe cross code for online internet. And they've actually used the tagline of the Be Media Smart campaign, the Stop, Think, Check. We've had this landing in our inboxes yesterday, and Martina told me not to smile, but I couldn't help smiling because this is a message that's now going to be delivered to all children in the country, and hopefully it will be a number one, on in the charts around the Stop, Think, Check kind of thing. So these are also qualitative measurements in a way, of value.
Although arguably also quantitative, because literally, if you're reaching every single child in the country, then of a certain age, then you are doing, you will have an effect. It is inevitably.
Yes.
I want to go to Aleksandra and ask her, I guess, a sort of a similar question, which is, I'm interested in the vast amount of experience that you have in terms of actually seeing projects and working with young people in particular. What, in your opinion, based on all of this sort of, the way that you've been evaluating and looking at the work that goes on, what do you think? What is the evidence that you are gathering telling you about what works?
What works? They work something unusual, and they want something that they don't have it in their regular classes. Which means if you bring them some journalist professionals, or I don't know, some popular YouTuber talking about social media habits and media usage and that sort of things, that keeps them track in their minds. So that is always works. Then, as I said in the presentation, it works when you put them some unusual practice. For example, if you put them on the field, working in real circumstances, real journalists, produce real news content that they can see published on the local TV, that works perfectly as well.
Thank you. It is always kind of slightly anecdotal that you hear that stuff, but I think once you hear it over and over and over again, it does start to build up a picture of actually really genuinely helpful picture of telling people what does work, particularly for teenagers and sort of young adults, as it were. I would like to turn to Alberto, if I can, to ask a sort of a similar question, but perhaps based more closely on the work that you've been doing to develop the toolkit. I'm just curious as to what in the discussions that you've had with the expert group that you set up, and in the kind of materials that you're starting to see to build up this toolkit, what kind of evidence and methodology are you seeing that you think is particularly helpful and could be helpful to practitioners in particular?
Yeah, I think we've seen sort of a few good examples of sort of practical things, especially from the US. So there's a series of studies that Stanford University conducted on training people, training students. They did with tens of thousands of students on avoiding disinformation, and I really recommend for reading. But both in terms of how to evaluate, because they did a very clever system of evaluation, which is it's basically pass an exam about distinguishing disinformation, and they have also a particular curriculum and lessons they recommend based on this idea of check out the sources. So the main message that a lot of the media literacy from a few years ago, where you try to see if a website is reliable by seeing, if it's well presented, if it's got footnotes, a lot of that doesn't work anymore. And what you need to do is straight away, if you read about something, go and check that something with several other sources. So I think that's a simple message, and I think it seems very well based on evidence that they've done a lot of testing of that. And also there's a bunch of studies from Daniel Rund at MIT about how disinformation is spread and what makes us more susceptible to disinformation and to sharing disinformation. And it's things like being very tribalistic. It's one of them. There's a bit sort of on the more qualitative side. There's an interesting book from a professor from Syracuse University, was talking about this idea of network pollution, sort of the amount of pollution that is in people's social media feeds is one of the big issues of media literacy, because in in the recent past, you turn on the news on TV, and you might have something that is wrong in there, but overall, you're just getting quality news throughout in most channels. But now, if you look at your social media feed, you just see loads and loads and loads of bad quality disinformation, fighting, and just for the human brain, it's exhausting. Like, how can you might be able to distinguish between information and disinformation for 10 times a day, but if you need to do it 200 times a day, is a different kettle of fish. So it's an interesting idea of this sort of pollution concept.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and presumably we'll be able to share some of these studies and links with the network as well. Just one last chance for anyone for questions. We'll be wrapping up very, very shortly. We should finish at the top of the hour, but I just wanted to also just ask you one last final question, Alberto, and that's about the link between the work that you're doing on evaluation and Ofcom's own research into people's media use and attitudes, so our own media literacy research. I think to some extent we are in the process, and have been in the process for quite a long time, of gathering evidence of problems. So what are the problems? What are the kind of areas where interventions might be needed? But I just wonder how much your work is connected to, is there any intention on the part of Ofcom, for example, to start longer term research into trying to understand what evidence of change is, how we are seeing, if we are putting into place, new interventions, and indeed possibly an online harms regulatory regime, when would we expect to kind of see that, and how do you talk to the people who are developing the metrics on which we base our media literacy research in order to try to plan for that kind of evidence gathering in the future?
Yeah, very much so. So there's a lot of synergy between this work and the work we already do, in terms of, both of us are trying to sort of somehow measure media literacy, or measure different aspects of media literacy, and it's from different angles, because what we're doing at the moment is to build a library for others to use for all the different purposes that practitioners have, but overall is to improve media literacy. While, as you say, we have our own research where we do try to get a view of the problem, and the same metrics can be useful for both. But it is absolutely right that there's some big change coming with the government has said that they are minded to appoint us as online regulators, and we are in the process of understand exactly what's that going to mean.
I think that's probably a good point to end on, because I think one of the and we must end, unfortunately, because I do think one of the challenges that we will have actually is to try to identify what types of interventions have led to the greatest and most effective change, and some of those might be media literacy ones, but some of those might in the end be the more kind of the more standard and traditional regulatory methods. Thank you all very, very much. I'm just going to hand back to Martina to say any closing words. If you have any closing words, Martina?
My only closing words, Maria, are thank you so much to the speakers today, but to all the speakers of the last 3 sessions, and everybody who has participated so well in this. It has been a joy, and thank you for inviting me to participate in it as well.
And huge thanks to you from me and from all of us for facilitating these discussions, which I think have been among the most useful, practical, and interesting that I have had the pleasure to be involved in my time in EPRA. I'm going to use the last couple of minutes to just say a few words about next steps and what we intend to do, and the kind of vision that we have for this group and its future. So with huge thanks to Martina for her support, and very much hope that she will be continue to be involved. I just want to say that we would like to use and build on the opportunity that we've had here to invite other participants into the EPRA network and the virtual meetings that we've been able to have, to slightly formalise the task force and to welcome and call for membership in the task force from other organisations as well, naturally built around the most of our participation, and most of our members will be EPRA members. On that point, we will be sending out some terms of reference soon in the coming weeks, and inviting those who would be interested to participate in a slightly more formal way to give us their names in the task force for the coming months and indeed years. We want to grow this task force with your active participation and input, and as a couple of first steps, we want to sort of build on these roundtables, which, although these have finished, we want to continue our work and discussions. So I'm just going to hand over to Emmanuel to talk a little bit about some practical next steps, and then I'll close off our meeting today. Emmanuel, please.
Hello. So it's already the end of our series of roundtable on media literacy networks, and it's gone very quickly. So when we devised that series, we had several aims in mind. It was first to emphasize the key importance of media literacy networks for a structured, systematic approach to a large range of media literacy issues, and bringing together all the stakeholders and authorities involved. The second aim was to build up on the top tips that we had developed in the EPRA media literacy task force to encourage the sharing of best practices around the creation of a media literacy network, the structure and operation of such network, and really as well emphasize the importance of the evaluation of media literacy networks and projects. Last but not least, of course, our aim, which is EPRA's motto, is to bring together people, so to encourage cooperation and synergies. So, of course, bringing together of regulators, small and large, from all parts of Europe in EPRA, that are very different stage of their journey towards the promotion of media literacy. But for the first time, what was new for us, it was the idea to introduce to EPRA members a range of various bodies in Europe which do very similar work in the field of media literacy, and for which we thought we could learn a lot from. So then how did it turn out? So maybe we could be inspired to do a bit of evaluation ourselves. So the first impression is that it's rather positive in terms of quantity and quality. We had to have a good number of and a good variety of participants to the three roundtable. From what we know, is that the people stayed throughout the discussion, which is a good sign. There was a lot of interaction in the chat, maybe a bit less today. And then we had really inspiring keynote speakers. So particular thanks to our Belgian friends, Andy from Media Vice and Patrick from CSM. So of course, we don't want to forget the other active participants for the willingness to share the experience. So Martina, Lea, Natia, Monica, Biliana, Stephanie, Aleksandra, and Alberto. So we hope that we share our view that the roundtable were really useful and enjoyable. But maybe you'll tell us what you think, and we'll follow on the good example of today by sending you a short evaluation form so that you have the possibility to tell us what we did well or not well, and how we could improve. So as Maria said, what's next? So the Secretariat of EPRA, so Geraldine and myself, will prepare the recording for that task force, for that meeting. We'll collect all the presentation, the links, and we'll circulate shortly together with this short evaluation form. We'll prepare as well. We commit to write a short paper on the key findings of this roundtable, because we are working on lots of different fields at the same time. This will be rather toward the end of the year. And as Maria said, we will write to everyone later on to ask for suggestion how we can go forward with this. We were tentatively thinking of thematic roundtable, whether that could be a good idea, and proposing as well a more formal set of terms of reference for this task force, with membership to be discussed around attendees, EPRA members and non-EPRA members. And here again, feel free to share all your suggestions and remarks. They're all very welcome. And maybe I'll finish there just thanking Martina for sticking up with EPRA, being such an inspiration for us all, and for Maria for passion for the subject of media literacy, which I think is quite communicative. And last but not least, my colleague Geraldine for being such a smooth administrator. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My huge thanks, of course, to Emmanuel and Geraldine for supporting and continuing to work with us on this in such an incredibly effective way, and for committing to follow up with some of those outputs. I also just wanted to trail the fact that I think later in October, we will be making available the second EPRA podcast, which will be about transparency and trust, the user's perspective in online media navigation, which is where we start to look in a bit more detail at media literacy and media plurality, following on from our previous work on plurality in EPRA. So I do recommend everyone has a listen to that. I don't know, my video appears to have stopped, so I think it's telling me that that this is time to wrap up. Thank you all very, very much again for your active participation. It's really been so fantastic to work with you all on these, and we very much look forward to speaking to you all about media literacy in the coming months again. Thanks a lot, and all the best, and have a lovely weekend.